Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Passball Show. Brought to you by St. Aloysius Church of Jackson, New Jersey, located on 935 Bennett's Mills Road. A church and school there. Lots of things going on there that we're going to discuss next week as we get ready for Super Bowl 52. I'm happy to be joined right now by former NFL kicker Steve Christie. Steve, John Pielli in New Jersey. I appreciate you having a couple minutes. Hey, Steve, first question I want to throw at you, your take as we get ready for Super Bowl 52. You got the Pats and the Eagles. What are you thinking in regards to the game coming up this Sunday?
Well, it's pretty funny because all during the week I've had to sort of explain myself because I have not picked the team. I'm sort of right down the middle. Philly's offensive coordinator, Frank Reich, was my holder in Buffalo for years and a fellow teammate. And then the flip side is I got a bunch of pals from Boston, so I mean, I'm right down the middle and non-committal, unfortunately. I think, though, what I'm hearing, I'm down in Sarasota, Florida, and what I'm hearing down here from everybody is that it's kind of funny because everybody is rooting for the Eagles down. Not everybody, but a lot of my friends down here are rooting for the Eagles, even though they're not Eagles fans. They just want somebody to knock New England off, and I think that I'm hearing more and more of that. You guys are sort of, they may be following other teams, but in this case, all of a sudden this week, they're Eagles fans.
No, and I get it. The underdog standpoint. I think a lot of people that follow football every year kind of get tired of seeing the same team year after year. And the Patriots, for what they've done, it's obviously an incredible accomplishment. The fact that they are, they're going to be in their 8th Super Bowl in the last 18 years, and I think because of that, I don't think they're getting necessarily the the respect that they deserve for the accomplishment that they have, being able to get there so many times.
Oh, I think you're right. I think you're dead on there because, I mean, it's so difficult to get there. Everything has to go right during the season. Everything has to go right in the playoffs. And even last year with the Super Bowl, the way things had finished, after 3 quarters, we thought Atlanta had it wrapped up, but then New England's got this knack of turning things on and getting it done when they have to. And sometimes it's not pretty, but, Tom Brady gets it done. And they have to, they deserve all the credit that they get. It is so hard to get there, and they, like you said, 8 years. In 18 years, that's incredible. And it just goes to show that, they've got a great coaching staff. They also have the support to keep the nucleus of players there. They know what they're doing, that's for sure. And, being a former Buffalo Bill for most of my career and having New England in our division, it's always been a case, certainly later on, was who in this group is going to knock them off. And really, no one's come up with an answer yet.
Well, you had a chance, obviously, to have some success when you were playing with the Buffalo Bills to play in a couple Super Bowls. For people that are watching the game and want to get a little bit of a perspective from what it's like to be there, for the preparation to being involved and actually playing in a game, what would you have to say about that?
I'd say Super Bowl week, or in the case where you have 2 weeks, it's so much hype. There's just so much stuff going on around you, and as a player, you've got to remember that you're there for a game, and a game that you may not be back at anytime soon or at all, ever really. It's an opportunity that only comes, I was fortunate to be in 2, but I only expected, to get into the 1. And I'm telling you, once the hype wears down and you're on the field warming up, it's back to game time. And all that glitz and glamour, you really have to put it behind you and do your job. You got to think about, hey, I got to warm up, I got to get my head right, and all the other stuff is secondary. You're there to do your job. You're there to win the game, and basically you get down to business, and that's the way I looked at it. I was a lot more nervous though for my first Super Bowl than I was for any other game, because I hadn't been through it. But thankfully, back then, guys like Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, Steve Tasker, Frank Reich, there's a bunch of guys that have been through it over and over again. So it was good for somebody like me who was coming from the Buccaneers organization that was 3-13, not knowing anything about playoffs, let alone Super Bowls. I was fortunate to be with a bunch of guys that had been there and done that. And although, obviously, as we know,
once again joined by longtime NFL kicker Steve Christie. Now, when you joined the Bills after a couple years in Tampa Bay, the team had been to the Super Bowl a couple years before, but the first time they were there was a very marked game with the miss by Scott Norwood in the final seconds of that game. As you get a chance to play in the Super Bowl your first year there, was any of that on your mind in regards to watching, let's say, another kicker that missed a kick, and certainly something that got talked about a lot?
It still gets talked about as we're talking about it now, but I'll tell you this, a quick little story. When I signed from Tampa to Buffalo, I grew up near Buffalo in Canada, just over the border, probably about an hour and a half away. That's it. So when I signed, my agent was from Toronto, my parents are from Oakville, and we all met in Orchard Park to meet Bill Polian and Marv Levy and sign the contract. For 1,500 fans outside of the stadium boycotting my signing because they love Scott Norwood so much. And that told me a lot about the fans in Buffalo, and it told me a lot about Scott Norwood and what kind of a guy he is. Scott and I are great friends now. But I'll tell you this, when I was watching that game against the Giants and Scott lined up, I said, you know what, that's my home field. I was sitting with my dad up in Canada watching the game, and I said, you know what, it's 47 yards, but the grass is perfect. And sure enough, Scott, I thought he crushed the ball. I thought he hit it really well. And it, right-footed kicker, the ball's supposed to veer left. It just didn't. And, there's maybe a couple reasons for that, but at the end of the day, the way Scott handled that and addressed the fans, they had a kind of a parade for the Bills after that game. Scott addressed all the fans there, and man, what a class act. I learned a lot from his myths, quite frankly. And unfortunately, he's the kind of guy, though, that he does take it to heart every year, and I think it's hard for him this time of the year because he's remembered for one kick, but he had one heck of a career. And like I said, when you show up to your new team and you expect the red carpet and you got people boycotting your arrival, then you kind of realize this is a special place. And Scott was a special guy, special player.
Now, once again, joined by Steve Christie. Now, the Buffalo Bills fans have obviously came out to, and supported their team this year. It's amazing how long it went between that team getting to the playoffs. It wasn't until, you're talking almost 20 years. And obviously you could tell the passion of the fan base, and it's something that you pretty much speak to. This is a group of fans that certainly were there for the Bills way before they were any good, and way before they went on that run to the 4 straight Super Bowls. I've gained a lot of respect just following that fan base. I tell you, they're very passionate, and it looks like they really do support their team thick and thin.
Yeah, this year would have been the 18th year without playoffs hadn't the Bengals done us a huge favor,
yes,
beating the Ravens. This would have been 18 years without the playoffs. I turned 50 this year. I was in the last Bills playoff game. That's how long it's been. My hair is gray. It's fallen out. It's been a long time for playoffs. So I'm thinking next year things will be better. I think more of it will be in our hands. We won't be relying on the Bengals or anyone else to win it for us. I think we'll be in better shape. Reality set in for us, though, against the Jags. The Jags were a pretty darn good team, as we found out when they went up to Pittsburgh and did the business. There's some good teams up and coming, and I would like to think that the Bills are in that bracket. And throughout all of this, my wife and I used to live up in Canada, just over the border, and would go to a number of Bills games. And even when the Bills were long out of the playoffs and it was 20 degrees out, that stadium was still full. And that's all the credit to the Bills fans. That is what they do in Buffalo. And, we love them, they love us, and I was just really lucky to play there. It's just an awesome place to play. Even though the weather's horrible, the people definitely make up for it.
No question. And once again, John Pielli joined by longtime NFL kicker Steve Christie. I did want to ask you one kicking question, because obviously, you mentioned on the Norwood miss, so many different things, impact the kick, whether it's the wind, whether it's the conditions of the field, and this is all stuff that I'm sure you take a lot of pride in preparing as you're getting ready to kick. Tell the listeners something they may not know in regards to what the preparation is for a kicker and what you got to be ready for on any given day, especially in inclement weather.
Well, the thing is, though, if you go to Minnesota is one thing, and even when the had the Super Bowl in New York, it was pretty cold. And, kicking that ball isn't as easy as it would be in a dome. The last Super Bowl I was in Atlanta, so you go out there, hey, it's a dome. I don't have to worry about my footing. I don't have to worry about the wind. So what I had to be careful was really taking the foot off the throttle in a sense, saying, hey, you know what, this is going to be easy. I don't have to worry about the weather. No, man, you still have to gear it in. You still have to bear down and really, really concentrate. And I think for kickers and punters, you get excited for good conditions and you get wary of bad ones. But I think playing in Buffalo, we get more and more excited for good weather games because you've got a lot less to worry about. And because we're conditioned to poor weather and poor conditions, I got really excited for playing in a dome. And my old special teams coach, Bruce DeHaven, and I would laugh and just say, could you imagine if you and Chris Moore, our punter at the time at Buffalo, were in a dome? And we kind of chuckled and go, yeah, but that wouldn't be any fun, would it? And I think that's sort of how you got to look at it. And, the Super Bowl, in my eyes, I would like to have it, in a warm climate, LA or I'd like to have it outside too. I'm kind of an old traditionalist that way, but I think the biggest trap is guys coming down from northern teams saying, hey, you know what? We're playing the Super Bowl in Miami or whatever. It's going to be easy. No, nothing's ever easy at the Super Bowl. You got to be ready to roll.
No question about it. And, I do want to ask you a Giants question since we are in the New York market. You had a chance to play there your last year in 2004. A little bit of a tricky situation. For Tom Coughlin's first year as the head coach there, Eli Manning drafted as the number 1 overall pick and traded to the Giants. But the Giants started out that season 5-4. And a tough decision was made to pass the reins from Kurt Warner to Eli Manning at that time. Now, with a 5-4 record, the Giants were in a position where they certainly could have competed for a wild card spot, possibly even a division. Looking back on that, what was going through your team's mind in regards to that transfer, which could have worked out very well, but obviously didn't.
Right, and the funny thing about that, John, is the fact that Kurt and I sat together on the road trips on the plane, so I could hear. And the other funny thing is that Doug Flutie and I were pretty close in Buffalo and in San Diego, so I went through a bit of that with Dougie. And then when it happened to Kurt, that's what I brought up to him, and I said, you know what, man, that is the business. And you're talking to a Super Bowl MVP who just got benched with a winning record. He wasn't happy, but he's another classy guy. What's he going to say? But that's a situation where, look, you're going to have to get Eli in. He's your first round pick, and he's got to get in there. He's got to play. And Kurt knew that, he was at the end of his career. Unfortunately, it happens to all of us, and the new guys need a shot. Yeah, okay, that's politics. But, no, it didn't work out. We didn't make the playoffs that year. We were 9-7, too. I think we beat the Cowboys, which was kind of sweet for me. My last game in the NFL, we beat the Cowboys. But, at the end of the day, it was a tough decision, I'm sure, by everyone at the Giants, but I think they had to make it. And unfortunately, that was also my 15th year in the league, and I knew that I was probably gone, and I was probably done. So it was disappointing for me not to make it to the playoffs that year, but I understood, hey, that's part of the business, and eventually you got to start Eli, and that's what they did. And it did pay off for them, not that year, but it did obviously down the road. It did. Thanks to a wild acrobatic catch by David Tyree, it worked out for Eli too.
No, of course, and short term it didn't seem like it worked out well, but long term, obviously it did. Winning those 2 Super Bowls and everything that Eli Manning and Tom Coughlin were able to do during that time. You would say there's probably more success than not, so it ended up working out. Last question I wanted to ask you, put your feelings aside in regards of rooting interest. What do you think we could expect in this Super Bowl 52?
Well, I just hope it's close. I mean, I think we all know that, and I saw it this year, especially when the last time the Bills played New England. New England sort of let the Bills play for the first half, and it almost looked like, okay, you've had your fun. Now we're getting down to business. In the second half, New England came out a totally different team, never let the Bills play with the ball. It's kind of like big brother's not letting little brother play. And that's what it looked like. I hope that doesn't happen with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are, a lot better than perhaps what we were at that time of the season. But I certainly hope that this isn't a situation like, it could happen like it did against
Yeah, and I've said this a couple times on the show. It's almost like you have to come up with a different game plan against, Tom Brady and that team for the end of the third quarter or the fourth quarter, or play them defensively differently than you did in the entire game, even though you're having success.
And you're right. And the thing is, what do you do? I mean, whether Gronk's in or out, or a lot of these former receivers coming and going, and running backs coming and going for New England, it doesn't seem to matter. Tom finds them. Tom gets these guys in the game, and you got to get to Tom, and you got to close down his options. How do you do that? I mean, it's tough. It's not going to be easy at all. And if the Eagles are going to win, they have to be outstanding in all three phases. Period.
No question about it. Steve, I really appreciate you having some time. Best of luck in the future, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Anytime. My pleasure.
And that was Steve Christie, longtime NFL kicker. Played with the Buccaneers, the Bills for many years, and then with the San Diego Chargers and the New York Giants to finish out his career. A couple of good points that he made there. The one talking about the Giants, because it was a transition year, 2004. They had the number one overall pick. Of course, they made the trade to get Eli Manning. Tom Coughlin's there in his first year. And I tell you can make a lot of similarities to what may be going on right now with the New York Giants. Pat Shurmur's in as the head coach. Eli Manning, you could say, maybe he is the Kurt Warner of 2018. The Giants are expected to, at some point, either take a quarterback early on, maybe with the number 2 overall pick, but are certainly going to be drafting what they view as Eli Manning's replacement over the course of time. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because Manning's going to want to play, just like Kurt Warner wanted to play, and just like I mentioned on the show a bunch of times. Joe Montana wanted to play. Brett Favre wanted to play. The bottom line is, Tom Brady is not going to want to go anywhere. And you see the situation that happened in New England in regards to them having to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. How much was influenced by Brady? How much of that was influenced by the owner? What we know for a fact is that Tom Brady wasn't ready to step aside and allow that next quarterback to come in. It's a tricky situation, because from a fan's perspective or the media perspective, we think of it logical. We think of the old guard and having to transfer in to a new quarterback, somebody that you expect to be the leader of your franchise for the next 10, 12, maybe 15 years. It's an easy decision for us, from our side, but we seldom look at it from the quarterback standpoint. The quarterback is a guy that takes a ton of pride in what he does, and he's never going to tell you that he's done, even if he is done. So that decision that's made is made for him, really, in most situations, without his input. But it's important for the franchise, because the franchise is the business. The franchise is what's going on long after that star quarterback plays. You're going to see that in Pittsburgh eventually with Ben Roethlisberger. You're going through it with Tom Brady right now in the New England Patriots. You're seeing what's happening with Eli Manning and the Giants. These are all guys that have a lot of pride. They know deep down that they're not going to play the game forever. But every single year they lace up and get ready to play. They consider themselves what they were at their best. They think they could play like they did in their prime. They're never going to be the ones that say, you know what, it's time for me to pass it on to the next guy. That's not what happens in the National Football League in regards to quarterbacks. Whether we as fans or the media perceive it that way, it's not how the quarterback perceives it. And it's always a delicate situation. And when you're dealing with a star player in general, and we could take this outside of football to any sport, a star that has put up Hall of Fame numbers, somebody that is going to have their number retired by the franchise, means the world to the franchise. In a lot of cases, has won championships for the franchise. At some point, they're not going to be what they were at their best. They'll never see that in their head, unfortunately. So that's why the decision sometimes is made for them. In Eli Manning's case, he looks like Pat Shurmur's interested in going with him going forward as a starting quarterback, but there's going to be somebody else there. Maybe it's Sam Darnold. Maybe it's Josh Rosen. Maybe it's Josh Allen or Baker Mayfield. Whoever it is knows when they're drafted that they were brought there to be the quarterback of the future for the New York Giants. And it may not happen in year one, but very soon they expect to be handed the reins. It's going to come at the expense of Eli Manning, whether he wants that to happen or not. I know he is very professional in the way that he handles himself. He is the absolute perfect spokesman. Whenever he's asked a question, he knows the exact right way to answer it, regardless of how he feels. But you know he wants to be out there. You know he doesn't want to be in a spot where he is going to be pulled, let's say, after the 9th game of the season, like Kurt Warner was when he took over the job with the New York Giants. He remembers it from that perspective. And he just like any other top quarterback, is not going to want that to happen to him. So that's going to be something the Giants got to think about going forward. If there's going to be such an issue with that, and you have to be honest with Eli, and you also have to ask him to be honest with you. If it's something that he feels uncomfortable about to a point where it's going to bother him if he's pulled mid-season, or God forbid the Giants get off to that same 5-4 start that they got off to in 2004, how would Eli Manning handle that? Is that something to a point where he would not want to be part of it if it was even a remote possibility? That's something that has to be discussed. Because maybe the best thing for Eli Manning is to be cut, take a job as a starting quarterback somewhere else where he knows he's not going to have anybody looking over his shoulder. He knows that if he throws an interception, then the media isn't going to be saying, hey, maybe it is time to play whoever that top young quarterback is. Each quarterback has to be treated differently. We like to put it in a category and just assume that every situation is going to be handled the same. It's not always that way. And it all depends on the individual. And Eli Manning, who is awesome with the media in regards to saying the right things, making it himself always seem like it's always team first, and that's what he is. If in this case he's not about that, that has to be discussed. It has to be discussed between the ownership, the general manager, the coach, and him. And if he's not going to be comfortable, if let's say the Giants are 4-4, and maybe a couple games behind in the wild card, but still have a chance, and the decision is made to go to that young quarterback, whether it's a Darnold or a Rosen or anybody they end up drafting, it may be time to part ways right now. And I tell you, talking to Steve Christie, a guy who ended up playing in 2 Super Bowls with the Buffalo Bills, to have to, take a job and essentially have people protesting outside of the stadium. I couldn't believe that when he told me. I'm amazing that, Scott Norwood certainly, is known for his missed kick in that Super Bowl against the Giants in 1990. But, the Bills fans embraced him. The Bills fans loved him, when they decided to change kickers, which I don't know if it was 100% attributed to that game. Teams got to make tough decisions. Steve Christie had a couple solid years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, comes in, and he's getting booed. He's getting essentially protested against, something that he had nothing to do with. But it shows the passion of the Bills fans of how much they believe in their own people. And, a guy who had a chance to kick 9 years with them, spend 9 years with that franchise, I'm sure he got the embracement and the encouragement from the fan base. And when he left there, he probably had the same respect that a Norwood or anybody else that belonged to that franchise did. Once again, John Pielli, happy to be with you. The number, if you want to be involved in the conversation, is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. As we get closer to the end of the show, I'll give you my Super Bowl prediction. And I'm not going to go nuts with it because as we've done football picks all year, I'm dealing with the spread. And the spread right now, as you look at it, is sitting at 4.5, which it's been for the last 3 days. And I've said all along, what can I expect out of watching this Super Bowl? It's got to be something pretty similar to what you've seen in every single one of these other New England Super Bowls, including the previous Super Bowl that the Eagles and the Patriots played in. A game that's going to be close. The Patriots, for whatever reason, in spite of their dominance during the regular season, which they deserve all the credit for. They deserve all the credit for all these winning seasons, all these division championships. The fact that they've, seemed like they're in the AFC championship game every single year. But as they get to the Super Bowl, are they that same dominant team that's running roughshod over the AFC East and the rest of the NFL during the regular season? No. And I don't know what the answer is to that. Do they play down to their competition, or is their competition a little bit better than it gets credit for? You know, that Carolina Panthers team with Jake Delhomme as their quarterback. We looked at the Patriots as a fierce team and as the favorite in that game. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the line was like 7 or 8 in that game. They were favored by a lot. Now, the fact that that game went down to the last possession, how much credit do you have to give to the Carolina Panthers, or how much is it an indictment on the Patriots for whatever reason not being able to dominate in the Super Bowl? I'll tell you, if they want to put a ribbon on the run that they've had over the last 18 years, it would be good from their perspective to go out there and win this game by 10 points or more. I just don't think from a logical standpoint that stands out. You look at them against Jacksonville last week, or 2 weeks ago, that Jacksonville team belonged on the same playing field as them. That Jacksonville team looked like it could compete with the Patriots if they were playing them every single week, could have played them that tough. And certainly if they got a couple breaks to go their way, they'd be going to the Super Bowl and not New England. And you look a couple years ago when Denver knocked them out. A couple years before that when Denver knocked them out again. It seems like when it comes to a big game, a game that matters for the Patriots, in some cases the AFC Championship game, but in a lot of cases the Super Bowl, the Patriots seem like they are beatable. And that's what I think appeals to that anti-Patriots fan too. Because there's a lot of people out there that, number one, don't like the Patriots because maybe they're a Jets fan, or maybe they're a Giants fan, or maybe they are just in general a fan that's just tired of seeing the New England Patriots get to the Super Bowl and continue to dominate the AFC like they do year in and year out. I mean, if you're a casual football fan, or even if you're a diehard football fan, and whatever reason your team is not having a lot of success, maybe you're just tired of seeing it be about the Patriots every single year. So I understand from that perspective why a lot of people would root against them. But I tell you, outside of Patriots fans, for those that like to see sustained success, like to, from a perspective of somebody that's watching, be able to witness something that they may not be able to witness again in their lifetime. I tell you, to watch the Patriots with Belichick and Brady win another Super Bowl, I know a lot of people will be upset. A lot of people will not like to see that. There's a lot of people out there that are rooting against it. I tell you, from a standpoint of dominance, I tell you, it would be fantastic to see this coach and this quarterback win again. And I don't know if they have another run in them after this year. Maybe this is it. From the Eagles' perspective, obviously that, New York fan base, there's a lot of people that dislike the Eagles. If you're a Giants fan, you certainly are probably not rooting for the Eagles. But there's a lot of perspective that, has to be looked at. The Eagles have done a lot this year. They were probably the best team in the NFC this season. And I would say we're probably be favorited in the Super Bowl if Carson Wentz was healthy all season, because they were rolling with it. They seemed like there wasn't a team in that entire conference, and very few teams in the entire National Football League, that were on the level both offensively and defensively. So this is a good Eagles team. If we go back to the last time that the Eagles and the Patriots played in the Super Bowl, I would say this team right here is leaps and bounds better than that. The only thing that they have going against them is Nick Foles. But Nick Foles just played the game of his life 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, and overall has played relatively well since he's taken over for the injured Wentz. So I think this is a good Eagles team, a team that defensively I think can do a lot of things to the Patriots that Jacksonville was able to do. New England is going to have to game plan having Gronkowski as we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show. Once again, John Pielli with you. If you want to join the program, the number is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. The Eagles' defense is pretty similar and maybe a little better in some areas. I don't think from a cornerback standpoint they quite match up with what Jacksonville was able to throw at the Patriots. But Rob Gronkowski being healthy, the question is he 100%? Is his head ringing still a little bit after that concussion he suffered against the Jaguars? It's a possibility. If I'm the Eagles, and I hate to say this because I don't mean to be mean when I say this, but I look at this in more of a game plan standpoint, you're going to want to jam him a little bit. You're going to want to give him a couple shots. If he happens to be going over the middle, I'm not necessarily saying try to hurt him, but I would hit him hard. Because you know what? The Patriots without Gronkowski is a very big deal. And they did look a little different 2 weeks ago without Gronkowski in there. And I made the comparison to the Tennessee-Kansas City game. It looked like the Chiefs, from an offensive standpoint, had the Titans covered. And once Travis Kelce got knocked out of that game, Tennessee was able to focus on the other star players, the other receivers, the other skill players. And the Chiefs looked like a different team. They couldn't move the ball down the field. Without Kelce, made a big difference in the way Tennessee was able to attack them. So I said all along, the Eagles are going to have 3 game plans. 2 game plans that involve Gronkowski. One, how you attack the Patriots with Gronk. One, how you're going to attack him without. And now in this case, you're focused. All right, we have to have a plan B in case Gronkowski is out of this game, or if he's unable to be effective, if his head's still ringing from 2 weeks ago. And I think the Eagles match up in regards to what they're able to do in their front seven a little bit better than Jacksonville did. I think they can get to the quarterback and maybe cause Tom Brady to have a little bit of a hard time, finding that dink and dunk receiver, finding the Amendola or the Deion Lewis, in those short little routes that they do. Because if they're able to do that, if they're able to get in on Brady and make things a little bit tougher for him, they got a very good chance. I think of that Denver defense, the year the Broncos won their last Super Bowl with Peyton Manning there, that front seven was on Brady all the time. They had some extra blitzes in there, and they made sure from a defensive standpoint that they were going to do everything they can to make Tom Brady's day tough. They were risking the big play to try to get at him. And the Eagles, if they want a chance, I tell you, they have a very good chance of winning this game. And a lot of it's going to be contingent on how they get to Tom Brady. And if they can't do that, then Brady may have an easy game. Maybe that game that I was talking about that New England needed to have in a Super Bowl to not just win by 3 points or not just, win the game in overtime, it may happen. But it's interesting to see. And I tell you, looking at this point spread right now, 4.5, I can't take the Patriots because I don't see the Patriots at this point being able to win the Super Bowl by 5 or more points. Now, if you're going to ask me who's going to win, I favor the Patriots, but I only favor the Patriots by a couple points. And if this line was 3 or less, then there would be no way that I would pick against the Patriots. But I tell you, it's to me, and obviously the betting lines are always contingent on the amount of people betting. The line is going to move if too many people are betting on one side. So the fact that 4.5 has stayed at this level for the last 3-4 days means that there is an equal amount of betting going on both sides. That the bettors think that the Patriots could win by 5, and just as many feel that the Patriots could win by 5 or more feel that the Patriots could win by 4 or less or lose. And it looks like 4.5 should stay the line as the game's coming up. But I have a hard time picking the Patriots. I don't think they're going to win by 5 points. I think they might win the Super Bowl, but 5 to me is too much to ask for if I'm putting money on this game. So we'll get this out of the way. I won't play the music today because it's only the one game. Pielli's picks. I'm going with the Eagles, but I'm taking the points. So I'm giving myself that little cushion. If the Patriots win by 4 or less or the Eagles win, then my money would be valuable. And I told you, every week when I do my picks, I put money on these games. So I'm not going to make a suggestion or I'm not going to throw out what I wouldn't bet on or am not betting on by myself. Once again, John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. If you want to be part of it, it's 732-364-3598. Couple different things going on. The odds, the last thing that I'm going to mention about The spread, like I said, is pretty steady, but the over is starting to be bet on a lot. So the number that's set up as the over seems to be increasing a little bit. So if you're going to bet the over, it seems like a lot more people are betting the over than the under. So the prediction is that it's probably going to be a higher scoring game than a lower scoring game. I may consider the under because I could see that the Eagles defense getting the job done to a point where they could keep the score down. So I actually may be more in favor of betting the under than the over. You have another clown out there declaring that he's going to guarantee a Super Bowl win, Alshon Jeffrey of the Eagles. And I tell you, it's a 50-50 shot whenever somebody does it. But once again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier in the week. When you have 2 weeks between the championship game and the Super Bowl, there's a whole lot of nothing going on. And Radio Row, you may be able to bring all these different players and sports personalities in there to talk, get some perspective. But I tell you, the media is going to pry and pry and pry. And I'm sure that there's some ass clown out there that was probably asking every single player that was involved on both teams to guarantee a Super Bowl win. And they finally got somebody to take the bait. Alshon Jeffrey is, I don't get it. I don't get what you can gain out of this. Now, is there any understanding that Alshon Jeffrey is not giving his all and is going to try to do everything he can to help the Philadelphia Eagles win a Super Bowl? He doesn't need to guarantee a win to get any more out of himself. So that doesn't impact his game planning. That doesn't impact anything that he does on the football field because he's still giving all he wants. There's no reason anybody goes into the Super Bowl and wants to lose it. But I will tell you, outside of the Patriots, and obviously this game means a lot in regards to the legacy of Belichick and Brady. They're still going to be considered two of the best ever at their respective positions, obviously quarterback and coach. But the Eagles could be another afterthought if they lose the Super Bowl. Because the one thing that gets forgotten about very quickly is who lost the Super Bowl. It is all about who wins. And it's so interesting looking at the National Football League compared to other sports because very few people, and obviously, if you follow football, you're supposed to know, but those casual football fans and those fans that watch the Super Bowl every year after year, probably cannot tell you who lost the Super Bowl. But another couple things that I want to get into today, Ravens general manager Ozzie Newsome is going to step down after the 2018 season. And it might not seem like a big deal, but I've been making a lot of comments and talking about, diversity in the National Football League. One thing that they've done a lousy job at is, for whatever reason, there aren't that many black executives and coaches in this league. And you're talking about whatever percentage you want to put out there of black players that are playing in the league. I still think this is a little bit of a problem. And I don't know how the NFL gets himself in a better position. I know there was a little bit of anarchy going on over the Oakland Raiders hiring of John Gruden and the fact that he was essentially just given the job. I thought that was a little bit different than what we're talking about with the Rooney Rule and the fact that there are not as many black head coaches in this league. I thought this was the exception to the rule because I don't think Mark Davis is firing Jack Del Rio if John Gruden isn't going to take the job. He's not going to fire Jack Del Rio and go through an extensive coaching search. He was zeroed in on one guy. I would bet if John Gruden wasn't ready to come back to the NFL and coach the Oakland Raiders, Jack Del Rio would still be their head coach. So to me, that's the one exception to the rule. Outside of that, I know Steve Wilkes got the job in Arizona, but I think a game that is dominated by black players should have more black head coaches. And the fact that that's not happening, there is an issue there. I don't know how the league gets through it. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily constructive to say, hey, for every job you must find, a darker skinned person to interview. I think there are plenty of candidates out there. Martin Mayhew was just interviewed for a spot with the Carolina Panthers in the front office, maybe even as a general manager. There's a lot of very productive African Americans out there, whether they're playing in the NFL, whether they used to play in the NFL, whether they're on coaching staffs right now. So it's something that has to get better. And I said from the ownership standpoint, there should be more minorities that are willing to make that investment in the team. And I think that's more on them as opposed to society against them. You know, if a minority owner puts up the capital in regards to buying a pro football team and gets voted down by the other owners, then you can scream racism all you want. But, we need more African-American businessmen and minority businessmen to step up and say, hey, I want to own a professional sports franchise. I just think it's something that's unfortunate that needs to get better. And it's something that I feel the need to bring up on this show. And I've brought it up more than once. But moving on, we got, some other things going on. Obviously, the big thing is the Super Bowl this weekend. Still got a couple Super Bowl boxes left, by the way, if anybody wants to, message me. Only got a couple left, so I'm pretty confident I'll be able to sell them. But obviously, everybody is into their little football pool and the Super Bowl boxes and stuff. It's, kind of another thing to pay attention to in regards to the game. And I think it also helps bring non-football fans kind of into the game a little bit. And I think in the end, you probably come out with a couple more football fans than you had before. I did want to comment a little bit on the thought that LeBron James would consider joining the Golden State Warriors after the season. I think more attention is being pointed to the fact that he probably will opt out of his deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I don't think that's a, kept secret at all. But the fact that he would take to the media in any way, shape, or form and leave open the possibility that he would want to join that dream team in Golden State, I think that would be terrible business on LeBron James's part. So when he goes out today and, basically calls it a rumor and says it's nonsense and says that's just somebody, trying to make a name for themselves by coming up with a story, I believe him. And listen, if he let anything, even if it was going on in his mind, even if it is how he really felt that he would consider going to Golden State, would he be foolish enough to let that leak to the media? I don't know. I mean, I take what he says, that it was nonsense and it's just somebody trying to make a name for himself, because of the issue that I have with the media. There's too many people that are not putting in the work to do their job. And they like to speculate about stuff. And I've said this all the time. It frustrates the hell out of me how many stories get written with these quote-unquote anonymous sources. When you put out there and say the source, I gave them my word that I wouldn't call them out for what they're saying. It's almost like a free pass to write whatever you want. Now, there are some respected journalists that may only go to that when they absolutely have to. And for them, they get a little bit of a pass. But when that story goes out that, there's unrest in the Cleveland Cavaliers locker room, unnamed players are saying they don't feel like they can win an NBA championship, that could have been true. But that's the kind of story that you want to put a name to. And if you're not willing to do that extra work to get that player to consent to using his name in the article or the story, then you're probably better off not publishing it. Because it doesn't have the same legs to it when you say something like that about an anonymous source. Somebody that's man enough to make that statement that they don't believe in their own team. And you know what? I look at the Cavaliers, they're struggling. If you're looking at where they sit, are they on pace to do what they did last year and absolutely, without a doubt, represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals? Listen, they got some work to do. They've struggled over their past 10, 15, or so games. There's unrest going on in that locker room. Kevin Love being out is certainly going to hurt them. As they get ready for the trading deadline, yes. If they think they're on the same level as the Golden State Warriors, they have to get better. They have to improve their personnel. But I said it a couple weeks ago, what they absolutely have to do, if they're smart, they need to figure out who doesn't believe that they could win a championship. because that's somebody I don't want in my freaking locker room. That's somebody I don't want on my roster. And you know what? If that player is talented enough, then I would use them as bait to get what you need to get to compete at the level of the Boston Celtics or the Toronto Raptors, two teams that are 4+ games ahead of them right now as we sit in the season. You got Washington, you got Miami. You got some up-and-coming teams. Milwaukee is sitting there with the 7th seed. They just fired their coach. The Philadelphia 76ers have a very good young core. It looks like they're striving in the right direction. I'll tell you this. If I'm that number 1 seed, whether it's Boston that holds on for it, whether it's Toronto, whether Cleveland makes a run and gets that number 1 seed, I wouldn't be so excited about playing Philadelphia in that first round. Especially if they're playing good basketball as the season's coming to a close. If they're hitting their stride towards the end of the season, that means that core is growing better together. And I'll tell you, you could see a very big upset. Certainly an 8 being a 1 will always be considered an upset. And I don't know if the Philadelphia 76ers are ready to compete for an NBA championship right now. Certainly even to come out of the Eastern Conference. But I tell you, I'd be scared if I drew the 76ers and I was either the number 1 or 2 seed, depending on where the Sixers finish up. Because they're going to be good going forward. You look at a Minnesota team in the West. They're starting to come into their own with their good young core. The addition of Jimmy Butler. Golden State obviously is running roughshod over everybody in that conference. You got Houston, who is always, you look at a James Harden and a Chris Paul, guys who, can put up numbers, but can never seem to win. So the thought is, how are they going to be able to win together? There's San Antonio, there's Oklahoma City. You got a couple teams there that I think could win a playoff series or 2. But I tell you, man, it's going to be impossible to expect anybody, especially coming out of the Western Conference, to top Golden State. The Eastern Conference, I think, is pretty wide open. It's interesting to see what Cleveland's going to do as we get towards the trading deadline. Are they going to make that big addition or 2? A Lou Williams, I think, could help them. You look at, let's say a George Hill. There's a couple of players out there that can make a difference and kind of make that team run a little more smoothly. It's interesting to see what they end up doing. But as we conclude today, talked about the Super Bowl earlier. We're happy to be joined by Steve Christie early on, 2-time, Super Bowl kicker for the Buffalo Bills. Spent, was it 13, 14 years in the National Football League. It did want to touch, and I'm glad I mentioned a point about, Ozzie Newsome stepping away. A guy, an African American, that certainly has had a great influence on this game. He's been a very good executive. You look at that organization stepping in a little bit of a different direction, but you obviously can't take anything away of anything that he did on the field. Hall of Fame tight end, really one of the best tight ends the game has ever seen. But, you look at the coaching situation, and I don't know if there's anything you got to do more in addition to the Rooney Rule. There needs to be more minority head coaches in the National Football League. Looking at another story that came out today, one of the agents, ended up making a call, and he decides to say pretty much what everybody else has been thinking over the last couple months. You look at free agency in Major League Baseball, and right now, as we sit on February 2nd, there are over 100 free agents that still have not been signed. And Brody Van Wagenen, a very prominent agent, went on the record today to say that players are outraged. Players are pretty pissed off in regards to what's going on with this. And I tell you, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to punch out the website of CBSSports.com one of these days, because you literally cannot read anything without these ass clown pop-ups of some schmuck person that can't wait to hear his own voice to tell you something that you already know. But I digress. Brody Van Wagenen, claims that players are outraged, and he made a pretty poignant statement in regards to the rise in salaries over the last several years, and the fact that all of a sudden it seems like teams are not interested in doing what they've done over the last several years. The one point that I've said that I know this is probably about 80+% of the reason that free agency is not at the level that it was over the last couple of years. It is the luxury tax. The luxury tax was brought in to penalize teams that willingly went over that number. A team like the Dodgers, or in the past the Yankees, the Red Sox, the San Francisco Giants, the Detroit Tigers, who slashed their payroll by over $40 million this past offseason. Teams that were looking to get over that 197, which is the luxury tax threshold, were being penalized in a compound interest type of way. They're over it 1 year, they're penalized this much. The second year, they're penalized more. Third year, they're penalized more. Fourth year, they're penalizing more. The obvious thing by looking at it, you're seeing many teams that are consistently over the 197. They can't take, from a business operation standpoint, those tax hits that they're getting every year. They're over 197 million. So what has happened? Major League Baseball has a salary cap. You may not want to admit it. A Major League Baseball player may not want to admit it. Scott Boras may not want to admit it. Anybody that has followed the game, Marvin Miller, as he's rolling over in his grave, hearing about this. Major League Baseball has a salary cap. It's called the luxury tax. Teams have been penalized 2, 3, and 4 years for being over it. All of a sudden, from a business standpoint, cannot deal with that anymore and have decided to back off. And they've backed off. You look at what the Dodgers did by making that ridiculous trade with the Atlanta Braves, traded over $40 million in regards to salaries to the Braves just to get it off of their books. Took on Matt Kemp's contract because it was over 2 years as opposed to 1. The Yankees not spending as much. I know they took the Stanton contract on, but they had some money coming off the books as well. Nobody's going to want to get over 197 right now. And they may want to do it next year. You got some special players out there, the Machados, the Bryce Harpers, the potential of Clayton Kershaw, Charlie Blackmon, who I continue to say is the most underrated player in all of Major League Baseball. But the problem is that 197 right now, as we look at 2018, is the salary cap of Major League Baseball. And teams are refusing to go over it as if they're not allowed to go over that number. Part of it may be decisions that were made by ownership. And I'm sure the owners, they probably talk to each other. So if you want to throw out the possibility of collusion being involved in this, I'm not saying that there's 30 owners that are in a conference call saying that we're not going to spend. But I tell you, owners talk to each other. And a lot of them are sharing the same issues. A lot of them have fear of this tax that they're going to have to deal with if they spend over $197 million on their roster for this coming season. So if we are trying to say that there is no salary cap in Major League Baseball, I'll tell you, my friends, there absolutely is. It's $197 million. It's only going to go up very little over the next couple of years. So yes, if a team has an opportunity to sign a Bryce Harper or a Manny Machado, they may be willing to go over it, but only in those special instances. Nobody's going to do that for an Eric Hosmer. Nobody's going to do that for a Mike Moustakas. The Boston Red Sox are considering doing that when it comes to J.D. Martinez. But the fact that he hasn't signed yet means that the Red Sox have some reservations. They may have to think about reducing some payroll in other places to be able to pay J.D. Martinez. And that's something that wasn't an issue in baseball before. It's something that nobody was thinking about, how they may have to curtail their spending. But now they do. And I tell you, this next collective bargaining agreement is going to be very interesting because we may be heading towards something that we haven't thought about in well over 20 years. The fact that there may be a work stoppage. There may be a baseball player strike, just like in 1994. And going back to that time, I'll tell you, there is a lot of economic similarities that we're seeing in the game right now. And I know the players are being paid way more than they ever have been. The same thing was said in 92, 93, and 94. So when we're talking about, oh man, players are bitching about getting paid, not getting paid more money, there's other issues going on in the game. And the thing that the Major League Baseball Players Union, ran by Donald Fehr for years, and you look at everybody that's involved, obviously Tony Clark, former Major League first baseman, is running the Players Association now. What they have taken the most pride in is the fact that this sport does not have a salary cap. And that was something that the baseball players and the union was going to fight for in 1992, going into 1994, leading to the strike, which cost the postseason of that year. So we could be heading for a serious work stoppage in Major League Baseball, and it's going to come down to this luxury tax. Players are upset about it. The Players Association is upset about it. Obviously, agents are pissed off because it's costing them money. What's going to get somebody more pissed off than anything? It's something that involves money in their pocket. That's why I always say, you hear a caller that's flipping out about the final score of a football game, it's because they put money on it and they lost money. When it costs you money, you get pissed off. And that's where the baseball players and the Players Association are at right now, because they're looking at the over 100 free agents that are out there and know that a good amount of them could make a ton of teams in Major League Baseball better. So from their perspective, why are they not being signed? And I tell you, the more we get into February, the more we're probably going to talk about this on this show. We're hitting a situation that we haven't seen since the 1980s. And the 1980s I'm talking about was when there was proof that there actually was collusion going on amongst the owners in Major League Baseball. Is there collusion going on now? I don't know. But I tell you, there's an owner or two that are talking to each other, and I'm sure they are all sharing the same opinion right now. But sad things that happened in the 1980s that cost a guy like Al Oliver a chance at the Hall of Fame. You know, a guy like Andre Dawson doesn't have a team to go to after he was a legend for the Montreal Expos, ends up, having to submit to a blank check in regards to whatever Dallas Green, who was the general manager of the Chicago Cubs, was willing to pay him to play. And you know what? What worked out for Andre Dawson is he put a major clause in that contract for what he would get, and he would get paid very well if he was the National League MVP that season. You know what he did in 1987? For a lousy Chicago Cubs team, he won the NL MVP. But I tell you, for somebody that loves baseball as much as I do, I hope some things start to get ironed out over the next year or so. Because as we head to this next collective bargaining agreement, I see the owners and the commissioner and the Players Association and the agents, they're very far apart right now. And we need to see something. Baseball is going to start in a couple weeks. Pitchers and catchers are going to start to report. What are we going to say when there's over 100 free agents that haven't been signed? That's something that hasn't happened in baseball history. Went a little over today. I thank everybody who's had a chance to tune into the program, not just today, but any day. Want to make sure that everybody knows it's an interactive show. Anything that's going on, whether it's Periscope, Facebook Live, or on demand on YouTube, please comment, send your views. They're all valuable. Everybody has an opinion. And, whatever you think is important. And that's what makes the world of sports great, the fact that we could all talk to each other. And to expand it out to the country that we have, we feel like we're in a place where our view doesn't matter. Well, every little bit does count. And discussions like this, whether it's on a rinky-dink show like I got, or on a major network where millions and millions of people are listening, your voice counts. It does. So don't ever forget that. We'll be back with you Monday. I think we're going to be on at 8 o'clock on Monday, so stay tuned. I'll let you know about any guests that are going to be on the show. Should be an exciting week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I hope your Super Bowl boxes go well, and everybody enjoys their weekend. Be back with you Monday, 8 o'clock. God bless you, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.